welcome to this week's episode of Opera and Me, presented by Opera Maine. I am your host, Robert Mellon. I've got a great show for you this week as I bring in tenor Adam Diegel to talk about his growth in this profession. Adam has sung at some of the biggest houses in the world, including the Metropolitan Opera, Seattle Opera, Opera Theatre of St. Louis, the English National Opera, Opera Australia, and Opera Nationale de Lyon. So please sit back, enjoy some great music, some great talk, and I'll see you on the other side. And I am sitting here now with the one, the only, Adam Diegel. Thank you for joining me on Opera Maine's web series, Opera in Me. So you are, I guess, I'm actually confident in saying this, you are a favorite at Opera Maine. You've been one of the few that has returned multiple times to do major roles. Your first time with the company, if I'm correct, was in 2012, where you played the role of Pinkerton in Butterfly. Then you followed that up in 2015 as Cavaradossi in Tosca. And then you came back the following year as Don José in Carmen. These are not small roles. I mean, this is not something you just kind of roll out of bed and do. How did you find yourself coming into these roles in your career?
Well, I never even thought about it that way. But yes, I guess I would consider myself very honored and humbled to be asked to do such demanding roles. Obviously, vocally, they are incredibly demanding, but also dramatically. I think sometimes a lot of people can kind of blasé the tenor role. I mean, I do too. Sometimes with some of my colleagues, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you're singing whatever. But yeah, it's a tremendous honor to be asked back so many times. And it's interesting because there's a certain amount of trust that the administration puts on you, and it's a big honor to be looked on as three leading roles. Fortunately, in all three of those productions that you mentioned, I had amazing colleagues to work with. The last time I was there was the Don José for Carmen, and I can remember fondly the mezzo-soprano that played Carmen, Lahyani, who just had a baby. Yeah. She was so incredible and so dynamic, and it was so much fun to play the whole entire story with a lot of ebb and flow and peaks and lows. And I remember the final scene, she's such a stage animal that you had to step your game up, not just vocally, but dramatically. And it makes it that much more enjoyable for not just the audience, but for everyone involved.
Of those three roles, do you feel like one is more difficult than the other two?
Don José is probably the most demanding vocally. You really have to pace yourself. And I've been incredibly fortunate I think I tallied it up one day. I think I have done about 52 performances of Don José so far. Wow. And about 14 different productions. And it's become a favorite because it's kind of now vocally, you just kind of set it. Yeah. And you just kind of ride it. be remiss of me to not point out that you have in fact been in all of those productions as well.
Yeah, in one way, shape, or form. Each year was a part just a little larger than the last. So you've now begun to do Wagner, Strauss. Did you ever see yourself going down that route, or did you always kind of see yourself as more of the Italianate tenor?
Your technique, the way you sing, evolves and it changes. Most of the time it's for the good, and I think my voice has gotten to a place where I can take on those new roles. It's incredibly demanding, and it's a different type of demanding. The German rep for me now, it fits like a glove. The Narabot and the Salome was just, it's not a big role and there's not a lot to sing, but the language is so much more familiar to me. I've been looking a lot at Zygmunt and Lohengrin, Parsifal, and they all seem like such a good fit now, where, you know, when we first met, that Butterfly, I couldn't say that back then. So it's an exciting, hopefully, new chapter.
I met you in 2012 when you were doing Pinkerton. You were a very different Adam by the time I knew you as Don Jose in 2016. I felt that the person that I knew back in 2012 was not somebody to bother. Whereas in 2016, you felt more like one of the crew. You felt more like you felt more a part of the team. Did you notice any difference between yourself in 2012 versus 2016, or 2012 and prior to that, and some point in there something changed, or was it just a mere perception on my part that I misinterpreted?
Well, I mean, look, any kind of bravado, machismo is based on insecurity, right? The more someone has an ego and is like, I'm the man, it's all stems from insecurity. I would say that the Adam of 2012 was incredibly insecure vocally. There was a lot of things going on in my life at that time. And by the time Don Jose rolled around in 16, yeah, there was a lot of things, a lot of good things. Mm-hmm. Made me look at singing differently, look at life differently, look at the business differently. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would agree with that. It was definitely well, vocally I was in much better place for that Don Jose than I was that Butterfly. And I think that is how most singers kind of deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. We all know when we're not singing well.
Right.
And we all kind of manifest that differently.
We grow in many different ways over time.
Yes.
And I think it's important for people to know that. And I think it's a great answer you give, that our insecurities fuel that. Yeah. And at that time, I mean, it was unbeknownst to us, but at that time you felt that you weren't singing well. And that probably snowballed into a lot of different issues that affected a lot of different parts of your life. So by the time you got to 2016, you were suddenly in a better mental space, and thus a better, a more jovial, fun person to be around.
Unfortunately, there were a lot of really negative things that went on between the first time we met and that Don Jose. That gives you perspective and hopefully gives you growth. Hopefully you can go forward in a very positive light. There was a lot of personal growth there for me. A lot of vocal growth, a lot of personal discovery, a lot of vocal discovery. Mm-hmm. And I hope that I've come on the other side of it in a much better place. A lot of people would just write me off. There's a lot of things in this business that are changing for the better. but I think just humanity in general, which is great. It's not so. There's a lot more analysis, I think, and acceptance of analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Of what kind of person you are, what kind of person you were, what kind of person do you want to be?
Yeah.
Which it can only make the world better.
I agree. Last question. What if you have one? What would be your top memory with Opera Maine?
It's a career highlight. Singing with James Morris. That Tosca was pretty. That act two scene with Scarpia and Cavaradossi was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, having been able to watch that from the wings was exciting enough. I can't imagine what you were feeling in that moment on stage with a legend like James Morris.
I mean, I was just trying to keep up with him professionally, vocally, everything. But he was such a gracious colleague. He was so encouraging. He was so magnanimous. I mean, just inspiring. He told some great stories, and his energy was so positive. And yeah, that was definitely, that's not a main highlight, but definitely a career highlight.
That's so cool. Adam, thank you so much for sitting with me today. It was a pleasure to talk with you and to catch back up. And thanks again for everything you've done for Opera Maine.
My pleasure, my friend. Anytime.
All right. Catch you later.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Opera and Me with Adam Diegel. I found the interview to be incredibly insightful and interesting, and I hope you felt the same. Join us next week when we have Roberto Calbon, who was the conductor for the Magic Flute in 2019. I'm super excited because Roberto and I are very close friends. Please make sure you also subscribe and like us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Opera Maine. I would like to end today's episode with a clip from Opera Maine's 2015 production of Tosca, where Adam Diegel sings Cavaradossi's Act 2 aria, E lucevan le stelle. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I can't wait to see you next week.